Hey, it's great sitting down with you. We're both AI founders living in New York City. I started Assembly AI 2017. We've run into each other a bunch and talked about what our journeys have been like running AI companies. The last 18 months has just been crazy. And so I'm really excited to sit down with you on camera and talk about what your experience has been like over the last 18 months, because I think that would be so helpful for other founders that are building companies in AI right now.
Yeah.
So to start, I'd love to learn more about just the founding story of Pinecone.
We've been through very similar experiences over the last several years, and uh, the founding story of Pinecone is, starts back in the early 2000s in my academic career, and then my first startup and my professional journey through Yahoo and AWS. I did my PhD and postdoc in computer science and applied math, mostly dealing with the foundational aspects of machine learning, algorithms, and what it was called big data back in the day and so on. Interestingly, we were working on machines with 512 megabytes of memory, and so like anything more than that was big data because you couldn't fit it in RAM, and so you had to get smart with algorithms and so on. I then started my first company, we sold that, and then I joined Yahoo as a scientist, became a director in charge of AI infrastructure at Yahoo. Yahoo back in the day was sort of like the paragon of innovation in AI, in machine learning, in infra, and so on. I moved to AWS to work with Swami Shiva Subramanian, who's now S team in AWS, and that entire fantastic team building SageMaker and a bunch of other services out of AWS to kind of power machine learning and AI. Back then it was
What year was this for
2016.
reference? Yeah.
Back then it was like mostly ML ops, and like the sort of like the zeitgeist of what people care about in AI kept changing. And I was there until middle of 2019 where I started Pinecone. And I'm saying all of this because throughout that time, vector search, vector databases, the infrastructure of information retrieval, sort of like the tectonic sort of like motion of information retrieval and search on the one hand, and like machine learning and modeling and deep learning and like all that stuff today that we call AI collectively, kept going, getting closer and closer and closer to the point that they were starting to really merge.
Yeah.
Right? If you remember the first fully trained open weights LLM really that sort of like kind of started triggering an avalanche of, hey, wait a second, we didn't call them LLMs back then. I don't think it was called that. It was called a transformer. Like any new disruptive technology, they were just clunky and opaque and weird and kind of hard to use, and very few people knew about them. But the people who knew about them already kind of like looked at it and said, wait a second, there's something here. This thing does something that we didn't see other technologies do, right? And so I started kind of seeing that final collision between the tectonic plates happening, and I'm like, okay, wait a second. Now this world of search and world of AI are colliding, and the technology in the middle has always been in the middle is a vector database. But I also thought it was too early because nobody knew what the hell a vector database was. I didn't know to call it a vector database.
What was it called back then?
It didn't have a name. Like I explained to people.
Is that why in your Forbes bio you're a database entrepreneur?
Yeah. I mean, jokes aside, the company almost died on the vine because we didn't have a name.
Yeah. What did you call it back then?
I forget exactly I tried everything. This is the most like depressing part of, like, I tried to learn from one meeting to the next. I tried everything and nothing landed. It was the most depressing thing in the world. Like I was on the verge of giving up. Like,
Yeah.
people have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. Like I was speaking a different language. Like
Yeah.
they just looked at me like, nothing. I'm getting nothing. At some point, I just asked one of our early customers. We just asked them like, hey, when you talk about the thing that you buy from us, what do you say it is? I'm just curious. And he said, we just call it a vector database because it's a database for our vectors. I'm like, sounds good. Thank you.
That's amazing.
We'll go with that.
Yeah. So you guys, that's something I didn't realize. Like, you guys really were like first to market with publicly talking about this thing and branding it as this is a vector database.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I got a lot of heat from my investors for that too.
How so?
Because they said, hey,
No one's
A,
gonna know
who
what this
gives a
is.
shit about databases?
Yeah.
Who builds a database anyway?
Yeah.
And B, what the hell's a vector? What do you want from us? Why are you talking about? Like, what are you doing this?
And what was your opinion back then, and what is it now on like why you do need something specialized for this task? You know?
Yeah. So first, the obvious, which is we have failed to build it in any other way. And it was built in very specialized ways in these different companies. I myself built a vector database 4 or 5 times in my career. In my first startup, at Yahoo, each one of those companies, Amazon multiple times.
Right.
I mean, not a standalone product, but into other products as as components, so on. And every time, like, we had to build something bespoke because we try to use whatever infra existed, and it was always like too slow, too expensive, didn't respond, couldn't be updated. Like, it was always like depressingly bad at something, right?
And a lot of people are building new applications, so they don't have a project at scale, right? They haven't faced these pain points that you faced because you were working on this technology 5-6 years ago. How do you think about, as a founder and you guys as a go-to-market team, now that you're trying to scale and grow, like effectively communicating that to prospects, to users, to developers that are really early in their journey that are maybe like, I don't even know what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's very hard, to be honest. I mean, because a lot of the sort of like competition, quote unquote, that we have is good enough for small use cases. It is good enough. If you have 10,000 vectors, you don't need Pinecone. I mean, you don't need anything. You need NumPy. You don't need nothing. Like, you need a matrix. You need nothing. Okay? You can choose to use whatever you want. It'll be fine because it's so dinky and just uninteresting. Right? No, you're not hitting any limit of any sort. Right?
Yeah.
And if you're just like learning how to build something and you just, oh, what is this vector thing and what is an embedding and what is this and how do I do RAG and I need to go run some notebook, everything seems to work, right? And so you get lulled into this like false perception that whatever I happen to have in my notebook is actually what I need, right? And that's a problem. We're all engineers. Like, we build with what we build, we get used to it, we kind of figure out all the sharp edges and the tweaks, and we find what we love about it, and we get attached to it, and so on. And if you can't kind of be that for most people, then it's hard to catch them on. It's hard to catch them later.
I'm sure the first version of Pinecone was not scalable, just like
not enough.
The first version of Assembly was not super scalable. I just wanted to like get it out there. I wasn't thinking about all the scalability issues we face when we were processing like 20 million API calls a day or something. So how you balance when you're talking to users and developers that tension of Pinecone is a solution you can use at scale with very, very large workloads, and it's like tried and true. And you don't really see that benefit right out of the gates when, to your point, like you could just use like a text file or a NumPy, whatever, to get started if you're at super small scale.
Yeah.
Because it's so new, how you think about just educating developers on that without, like turning off developers, like, oh no, trust me, like you need this production. Like, developers don't want to hear like production ready and like enterprise grade. They want to.
I don't think it's. First of all, you don't speak with engineers.
Over email?
No, there's no way. Like, I don't want to be spoken to when I build something.
No.
If you are building whatever it is you're building, you just want the best tools and you want to choose the best, whatever. You want to move fast and you want to make good decisions and really like just build whatever it is you're building, right? And our job is to make that as seamless and fantastic a journey as possible.
Yeah, from like beginning.
From beginning to end.
Yeah.
And so there are 2 states of mind that I talk about a lot here and like in our product, and hopefully people get to see it. It's love and trust, right? First of all, you have to love the experience. And so we think very, very deeply about the interfaces and why we should or should not include some knob, and is it absolutely necessary, and so on. So like we really try to be super, super minimalistic, so and kind of automate everything that you shouldn't be worried about. Like, so for example, we don't let customers choose the index type for the vectors. And in the beginning, people kept like, oh, I want to change from this to that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why? Don't you just want it to be fast and easy and cheap and performant? Like, yeah. Like, okay. Is it not? Like, are you happy with what you're getting? Yeah, great. Then why would you want to tinker with it? And we can tell them, hey, when you have 50 different apps running in production, like, are you going to test all 50 and make 50 decisions on which, like, how you want to configure everything? Or do you want to just, for this to just work?
Right.
It's like, oh, yeah, fine. I get it now. I want it to just work. I'm like, great. We agree. Okay. So there's love. There's like, oh, you just do something that it feels good, that you love tinkering with, that you get immediate value out of, that like snappy and just fun to work with. And you're like, oh, I get, as an engineer, I just love it. These people get me. I get what I need, and like I love building with this shit. Okay, you have to have that feeling. If you don't inspire that in your customers, you don't have a business. Like you really, this is like maybe you do in some weird way, not a PLG motion, not a developer-led motion. Okay. The second thing is trust. Okay, and again something I tell my team all the time is that people would use a product that is maybe not perfect or missing a feature or less performant. They will tolerate suboptimal experiences. What they will not do is work with a technology or with a company they don't trust. Okay? And so we go above and beyond to be absolutely transparent and open, and at the same time as an environment be super, super robust and trustworthy and so on.
I'm curious how you also think about that trust coming through your go-to-market motion, like, and just how you sell Pinecone, how you price it. What I think about is like serverless, right? Serverless came out, it's a lot cheaper. And I think that's a great example of like building trust with your customers. Like, hey, we're offering something that's a lot cheaper that you can move to, that's going to work well, that is like, you're going to pay Pinecone less, but we're still doing it because we know we're your infrastructure and we want this to be scalable. And so I'm thinking, how do you think about that trust coming through when you think about your go-to-market motion and interacting with customers and users and pricing and packaging and all those things?
So first I'll tell you who's not happy about it.
I could guess.
You can guess?
Does it start with I?
It starts with I, yes.
Does it end with S?
It ends with Vestos. No, but jokes aside, I mean, for good reasons they're unhappy with us.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a business, right? Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like confuses everyone, including our customers. We have customers who happily paid us $100,000 a year on running their infrastructure on Pinecone. And we went to them and told them, great, please upgrade, and going forward, you'll pay us $5,000 a month, a year. And they're like, okay, what's the catch? What's happening here? It's like, nothing's happening. It's like, how is this worse for me? It's not worse, it's strictly better. And then my sales team is also pissed, by the way. It's like, oh, I just worked on this deal for like 4 months. Mm-hmm. And now, like, I don't even know why I'm doing this, because they're gonna pay us $500 a month. And like, I don't, well, that's nothing.
Yeah.
Like, it's not worth it for me even. I'm just wasting my time. I'm like, yeah, maybe, right? My response to that is that it's an illusion, right? If you think you can charge $10,000 for something, but like you can actually vend it with profit at 500, the sort of the false choice for you to charge 10,500 is a false choice. If you keep charging 10,000, you're going to charge zero, because you're going to churn all of those customers. You know, it's like, this is unsustainable. If you can build it in a way that you can make a decent profit out of selling it at 500, that should be the price. Because if you don't do it, somebody else will do it, mm-hmm. right? And so I'd rather disrupt myself than have somebody else disrupt me, right? And so, yes, I don't like it that, you know, our revenue's taken a massive hit on this transition. I don't love it that, you know, I love it for the customers so they pay less. As a company, it's not good for us, right? Mm-hmm. But in the long term, that's 100% the right thing to do, and I think it's going to pay out. But we're going to have to stick, you know, we're going to have to stick with it for a long time.
Yeah, I think the unique thing about the types of companies that we're building and AI companies is that the algorithmic and technological improvements that can happen within a year's time can be orders of magnitude in terms of lowering latency, lower costs. And I don't think that is unique to like traditional SaaS businesses or traditional startups where it's not like all of a sudden Stripe is going to find a way to process a credit card for 1,000x cheaper and can
Yes.
lower prices by 10x. Like it's not like Amazon can figure out a way to deliver packages 100x cheaper within a year. I mean, I know they're working on drones and
That's
last
true. They
mile,
would love it.
but there's so much investment going into, I mean, hardware even. There's custom hardware being made for LM inference, for transformer
Yeah.
inference, and that alone is going to be able to provide a lot of reduction in inference costs. With LLMs, like model caching is a thing, right, for LLM inference that LM companies are starting to release. So the rate of technological change around serving AI infrastructure, especially just given the like all at a macro level, all the investment and focus in this space is crazy. And I think to your point, we think about it similarly. Like we need to be out ahead of that. And yeah, I mean, I remember when we met we were at this dinner and you were thinking about this, I think earlier than a lot of founders and companies were. You were like, you got to just be ahead of the curve and like focus on driving usage and getting people to continue to run more and more workloads on your platform because the lower cost, yes, that customer that was running 600K can now run on the free tier, but I'm sure the way you think about it, and tell me if you disagree, is like there's now thousands more potential customers that can
Correct.
run workloads that couldn't before because it was prohibitively expensive and
Right.
it just was not possible before.
100%. And I think there's sort of like a race that sometimes like we're ahead of and sometimes we're behind as an industry, not Pinecone or Assembly, of how fast technology is improving, costs are reducing, like going down and so on. And at the same time, how fast use cases are ramping up
Yeah.
and workloads are being created, right? And so sure, you can cut costs by 10x, but guess what? If there aren't 10x more workloads to be had right now in the market for you, then your revenue is going to go down.
Right.
Right. That is a delicate balance to strike. Right?
Totally.
And I think frankly, it's a struggle now for every AI infrastructure company because we are getting better really, really fast. And and we do want to share that efficiency with our customers, but if we need to 10x our usage base and workloads within a year, that's a tall order.
Yeah, especially even as an infrastructure company, there just is time for like there's a certain amount of time required for users, for developers to build something with Pinecone, with Assembly, to launch it, to get usage, to get users. They might be able to now say, okay, great, I can do this thing now with Assembly or with Pinecone or with whatever, OpenAI, GPT-4o Mini, that I couldn't do before. But it's going to take me 6 months to go get that to market, get usage. It might take me a year to have a very mature, like large scale workload. I mean, I talked to a lot of other founders in AI infrastructure space and everyone's, dealing with that because you're almost sometimes caught off guard by how much faster or lower cost something gets, right? You build a new model or you build some new serving infrastructure,
Oh, yeah.
put it in production, and then you realize like, holy crap, this thing's actually like super efficient. Okay, now we got to go get this thing to market. How do we think about that? We have to go amend these contracts. We have to update this website. We have to go do all this work to get that out, and that takes time. So I think that's another dynamic too. It's oftentimes you're like surprised by just how much the rate of change and how much better things are getting.
Yeah, I'm with you. There are a lot of requests that require you to fundamentally somehow make engineering trade-offs that will hamper your progress in the future, right? So one of those, for example, is open source. If you're a diehard fanatic for open source, we're sorry, we can't use Pinecone, okay? That gave us so much innovation speed and our ability to change the underlying technology, our ability to ship better products under the hood. That was a huge decision. If you don't think I hear on a bi-weekly basis from a large customer, we only want open source, you're wrong. By the way, 9 out of 10 of them, if you ask them why they only want open source and you start talking about it, you figure out most of the time they don't really need open source at all. They want control, they want security, they want a lot of things that they think open source gives them. And then you start kind of walking them through it. It's like, oh, do you think it's cheaper? Why do you think it's cheaper? Like, do you think it's more safe? Why do you think it's more safe? Do you think it's more this? Why do you think that? And so on. Some people are diehard fanatics for open source. You can't change that. But more often than not, it's not a problem. It was a huge achievement, a huge benefit for us. Same thing for being a managed service, okay? Same thing about being multi-tenant for most of our customers. We can all do single tenancy for large customers and so on. So there are these like very core decisions to who we are as a product that allows us to scale, allows us to innovate quickly, allows us to operate the business in an efficient way. We have to say no and just sort of like section off some part of the business and say, you know what?
Just not going to go for that.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to not go for it right now because otherwise I get pulled in a million different directions. I'm sure you've done the same thing, by the way. I'm sure there's a million different requests that you get. You're like, sorry.
For us, last year, 2023, was this explosion. And so many things were being built on the API. We're trying to support all of them. Everything that I just spoke about, streaming, asynchronous, batch modes, all these different types of applications. And then coming into this year, we realized, you know what, we really need to pick a couple applications and really focus on the product for those applications, taking big steps forward. Because if we allocate our focus and our compute and our efforts on that, we can take big steps forward for that type of product and that type of application. And then we'll go and work on the next one. But it's difficult because there's a lot, we get pulled in a lot of directions. And I think our job is to be this, we have to be like as a company, a very good product manager to try to figure out, do we go focus on this or do we focus on this? And if you get that wrong, that can be really bad because some of these research threads, they take 6, 9, 12 months if you want to go improve a model in a certain area.
Yeah.
So for us, we're always trying to stay really close to where we think the market's moving, where applications are maturing. And there's some right now where I talk to enterprise companies on a weekly basis too that have committees and task force and sometimes even budgets for certain types of applications, but they're all in the prototype phase. And I think that there's still a lot that has to be improved from a technology perspective before what they're trying to do can actually like be viable in production, whether it's a cost or reliability. I think of self-driving cars, like 95% accuracy of a self-driving car is actually like amazing, but it probably won't get legalized because that 5% error rate, even 1% error rate is just too big if you're going to deploy these things just out on the street in New York City.
Correct.
Similarly, if you're going to automate a phone operator, the error tolerance you have is probably very low, and the cost to deploy something like that at scale is going to be very high. So you're very cost conscious. And so we're just thinking about all these dynamics all the time when we think about what to build for.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of great things today. On a closing note, you've now been a founder for 6 years. That's your second company. What is one piece of advice you'd give to yourself if you were starting Pinecone again today?
Wow, so many. The most important thing is I would just like be gentle with yourself. Your own mental health, your own physical health, your own mood, your own state of mind are a critical asset, not only for your well-being, but for the well-being of the company. And I think it's very easy to work 18 hours a day for 3 years and burn out and be dead. And that's, it's building companies is hard. You'll change, like in a changing world, changing environment, You're doing a million things for the first time. You're going to make 1,000 mistakes. Whatever. It's okay. That's the journey. It's not easy to accept because it's very hard to be hard on yourself or demand more, and somehow being a little bit gentle with yourself is sometimes something that people don't do naturally.
Yeah. And I don't think enough founders talk about that today. You know, there's a lot of LinkedIn posts around like lists people are making, and there's a big rah-rah culture, I think, in startups, which is, I understand. I mean, we do it too. Like, but I don't think enough founders talk about just, it is hard to build companies.
I mean, there's a lot of just show off like BS out there. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I wake up at 4 a.m. and do an hour of yoga, and then I drink a protein shake, and I read the news for 3 hours on a treadmill. I'm like, just give me a freaking break. Like,
Yeah. It just sets wrong expectations.
yeah,
It's not what it's like.
That's not what I wake up and
I wake up. And
I
check
wake
Slack.
up and I have 700 emails and I'm like
Yeah.
trying to get shit done.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me. This was awesome, and really appreciate everything we talked through today. It was great.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Cool.